All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us here for a Fedora Council video meeting. As a quick introduction to the Fedora Council, we are the top level governance decision-making body group in the Fedora project. And today's presentation, we normally meet every 2 weeks as a group in our public Matrix channel meetings. Time to time, we schedule a video meeting, and that's a chance for us to have updates from the community, updates about what the council is doing or what we've been working on, and to have an opportunity for the community to weigh in and take part in some of these conversations. So today's video meeting, and I'll share a link here to the wiki page where you can find more information about these video meetings. Today's presentation is actually about a council ticket related to our annual Fedora Council Strategy Summit. If you've been around before, you might remember these as Fedora Council Hackfests. This year, we took on a new name for it because we were also taking on a new focus for the event and what we were hoping to get out of our annual time together as the face-to-face. So I put some links in there in the chat if you want to dig into the full context of how what this conversation has been and how we've been having this in the public since December. But today's presentation is going to be from our Fedora project leader, Jeff Spaleta, and he's going to walk us through some of the key takeaways and summary of what the Fedora Council was up to earlier this month in February at our face-to-face gathering. And some of the things that we're hoping to share out with the community and things you can expect to keep an eye out for throughout the next 2 release cycles and beyond. So with that, I think we are ready to go ahead and hand over here. So I will pass the baton over to Jeff to walk us through the 2026 Strategy Summit recap. Over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Just one question, because this is also going to be a Q&A. Are we going to be doing Q&As after the presentation is complete? Or are we going to be doing Q&As in line?
That is a great question. So I'm going to turn on, or people should be able to see a Q&A option in Google Meet under the meeting tools or in the little 3x3 grid. Can someone just confirm that that's visible and that you can add questions there?
I will attempt to ask a question right now. Oh, yep, we can see it.
All right. I see the questions. Great. So if you have questions while we go, I'd say, Jeff, you go ahead and present during the 30 minutes. And if anyone watching wants to add a question in, and you can also upvote and vote on questions as well from other folks, go ahead and use the Q&A feature during the presentation. And we're going to leave the last approximately 30 minutes or so, we'll see as time allows, for just going through the Q&A. So we'll go through some of the questions that people type into the chat. We'll also have hopefully a little bit of time to do some live Q&A as well at the end of the presentation. How does that sound, Jeff?
That sounds great. In fact, I'm expecting that some of the other council members will need to answer some of the questions, especially if you're an initiative lead, because I am not going to get the details right, and you will have to speak for yourself most likely. So with that, I will get started. Hello, everyone. I am the not quite as new as I used to be Fedora project leader. And this was the first opportunity for me to do a face-to-face with the Fedora Council. And I really appreciated the opportunity to get in a room with people, a chunk of people. Some people had to work remote. And unfortunately, we had one person who couldn't make it, David, as a last minute, he was unable to attend. So let me see if I can actually work technology. So the summit in a nutshell. Whoops, why does that have an animation on it? So we were in Tirana, Albania, and I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, One Connect Hub, who provided the space, and we were at the pyramid in basically downtown Tirana, and the little circled cube is where we had our working session. It was upstairs in a lovely co-working space, basically, for a meeting space. We could interact with remote attendees and also have some discussion in the room. And I will say, technology is always hard. And I apologize to everyone who came in remote for 3 8-hour days. That I'm sure that was tough for the remote attendees who were participating with us. So, and I should have tested that. So we were doing this right after FOSDEM, and so some of us had a long jump, and I'm amazed that we were able to spend 3 focused days after so many of us had spent 5 or 6 days at FOSDEM being overwhelmed as well. But it was a convenient time because we were a lot of us were already in Europe for FOSDEM, and it was a great opportunity to have a face-to-face somewhere in theater. So here's everyone who was in attendance. Pictured here, or everyone who was live at the event. We have Tomas, who was from the CLE team, who's works on infrastructure. We have Justin and myself, Peter, Aleksandra, the other Peter, and Jonah. Not pictured, who came in remote, Miro and Akashdeep, Ryan and Laura, and Allison helped us as a facilitator to do some of the activities, which really helped us along helping us define what contribution was, and I'll get into that. And like I said, Dave was the only person who couldn't make it that we expected to make it in the last minute, couldn't be there. So why are we doing this? This is a high bandwidth setting for council where we can focus for 2 or 3 days to talk about strategic direction for the project. And really the focus here was thinking about scaling contributions. And I think everything that I put on the agenda with the help of Justin was aimed around that focus. So like I said, and this is blurry for a reason because this was like work product for a Miro board. We had a lot of interesting interactive discussions around contribution that really broke up the day. And I want to really shout out to Allison for the work she did with Justin to create a facilitated process for these activities, because we had some long discussions and the activities actually broke that up and let us get more work done in 8 hours without being burned out. And one of the outputs, again, sorry for the blurry picture, but we had a series of outputs associated with time. That's actually the wrong picture. I apologize. We actually took some action items from each of the discussions, or most of the discussions we had, and they will be showing up hopefully in FLOC 2026 in terms of a critical milestone date, where we will be communicating draft proposals before FLOC to address some of the things that we took as action items with the community. Because all of this is about putting enough work together so that we can come to the community with draft proposals to discuss. So I started the session with providing the mental model that I have in my head for Fedora project for the council. And I'm sure some of you who have read the daily summaries discussion have seen what my mental model is. And I think of Fedora, the project, as a weird research university, specifically a US university. And my role is a weird university president. And the primary task for this role is the overall strategic vision and mission of the overall project. That mental model, I actually take it further, and I actually think it's actually a good model for a lot of the governance relationships associated with the project, not just council. So in that model that I have in my head, Red Hat is basically acts as the funding organization, which, if you're familiar with U.S. Publicly run institutions, is similar to the state legislature. Council exists as university regents or trustees. Our full set of contributors are like the university faculty. FESCO, in my mind, acts as a faculty senate and really provides oversight for what the faculty do collectively and things like that. Our users are students and the public, and Red Hat, the community Linux engineering team, and OSPO, though I guess it's no longer OSPO, right? It now has an AI in the name. Are basically among our staff and administrators that help make sure the university runs, right? So what I see Fedora Council's role specifically is that Council is there to interpret the core mission as informed by the interest of Red Hat as the sponsoring organization. And it creates strategic vision and process that supports core mission. In practice, that means Council sits in the really uncomfortable position of translating between the flat hierarchy that is the contributor space, right? That is the faculty space where everyone are equal in a meritocracy, right? And then the top-down hierarchy of the funding sponsor, Red Hat, that provides us with critical engineering and administrative resources. And it's not a comfortable place to be. It's trying to translate between those two cultures is the job. And I appreciate every single person who decides to get elected and is going to be working with me at the council level to do that. So the summit agenda itself, I curated a list, what I think are strategically important things that can be actionable at the council level and relate to the Fedora project core mission, and have a significant discussion already in the community. These aren't things that I've come up with. These are things that are being discussed, and I think council has a role from a governance standpoint to set some strategic direction. So the things that we talked about scoping an external nonprofit. We have a series of initiative reports, and initiatives are understood to be council strategic spikes to get something done along a strategic trajectory. We had a discussion and a set of interactive activities around the idea of defining contribution and figuring out how to measure it. And we also, on the last day, had discussions about what I think are strategic technologies moving forward, specifically Konflux and Flatpak. And I have to make a note right now. The intention was to have David as the FESCO liaison to council in those discussions. And unfortunately, he was unable to make it sort of last minute. And but that's why they were on the agenda. We wanted to make sure we had a FESCO member there, and unfortunately it just didn't happen. And we have to make sure in the future we make sure we have that liaison in the room, even if the current one is unavailable. So that's something I know I need to work on. So starting with scoping the external nonprofit, this is actually a discussion that's been happening since 2024. I'm not sure everyone is aware, but there's an opportunity here to basically expand what is possible in terms of gathering community resources to finance or fund more work. This is about making the pie bigger, scaling out, more engagement, being able to use shared resources to do more, right? I think to some extent, and we may be hitting a limit in terms of what Red Hat and IBM processes can do. Corporate processes really aren't good at dealing with community crowdsourcing to some extent, right? And there's an opportunity here to use a nonprofit. In my model, I think of it as a booster club for the university to expand what the reach of what we can do collectively. So as part of the council discussion, we really focused on the shared understanding of the capabilities of the open collective platform as a way to take in contributions and redistribute them using physical hosts. We have a couple of follow-up actions for the council. We're going I have an action personally to follow up with Red Hat Legal to make sure that this is a viable path forward. I know that Matthew previously had gotten tentative communication with Red Hat Legal, and we need to follow up and get into more specifics there about what is possible from their point of view. We're also we've taken an action to draft a council policy about what we needed to think is okay to set up open collective projects with a suitable physical host, so we feel comfortable letting that project make use of the trademark and ask for donations to get things done. So I think I've had some subsequent conversations with the group of community members who have been having this conversation from 2024. I actually have learned that things are further along than I thought, so we might be able to move forward faster than what we originally had decided in Summit. It's a matter of doing the work and getting things done by Flock and seeing if we can have an experiment there ready to go, and we can try this out and try to increase the resources using a nonprofit. So the other thing we did sort of on the first day was we spent a lot of time talking about what is Fedora contribution. I believe that the core mission requires us to understand and measure contribution in a very broad sense. We did a series of facilitated exercises on all 3 days, but really aimed at trying to help us get in the mindset of understanding and trying to measure what is measurable about contribution. I think the discussion we ended up having in terms of actual discussion in the room, we were mostly focused on the recent community discussion around how we define contribution ends up showing up as voting eligibility mechanisms for things, in particular discussion that's happened was around FESCO. And I think what we decided we have to draft a proposal that helps define contribution, that informs measurement and the assessment around the voting processes. And that's actually going to be actionable and drafted before Flock, so it can be discussed there. So we also had a series of initiative reports. I think the biggest one continues to be the Forge. The Forge is an opportunity for us to bring back a lot of projects, a lot of process into one place with them, and start working on more modern contribution workflows. The initiative lead and the Tomas, who represent from CLE, indicated or re-indicated the desire to decommission what we're using Pagure for process and projects by Flock. Council discussion really focused on understanding the mitigation paths for the private ticket workflows that exist right now that can't be done inside Forgio yet. There is an in development feature that CLE and upstream Forgio are working on to implement this feature, but the assumption right now is that will not be fully available in time for the Flock. I don't want to say deadline, the opportunity to decommission Pagure by Flock. So we took some actions there. We're drafting a policy concerning project use of the Fedora Forge implementation versus public Forge services such as Codeberg. My understanding is, and I think the understanding in the room is that the intent is for Fedora to stop being a general project hosting service and allow the public services that use the same code base to provide that services. But we have to have a policy in place so we know what we allow to use in our infrastructure versus what we encourage to use in public services. We also took on commitments to make sure that council and initiative processes migrate to the forge that is now available and report publicly on that experience by the release party. We want to make sure that we are doing our part to do the migrations for our processes so that other parts of the project feel that it's comfortable to do that migration if they haven't done so already. There's also a commitment from the Forge Initiative to submit a proposal to FESCO on doing the next part of the transition, which is not just the project space, but the diskette migration from Pajor-backed implementation to a Forgio-backed implementation. But that is in the time frame of Flock and not anticipated to be before that. So we also had an initiative report from Docs, and I think the Docs initiative is a great opportunity for us to scale in contributors who are provide just a new entry point for people who are technically skilled, but they're not packagers, right? Users who have the ability to do testing and to help with documentation, right? So through the discussion, my takeaway from the discussion from the Docs initiative leads was currently there's not a clear onboarding process, and I think we all agree that that's a challenge everywhere in the project. Also, the change proposal process was identified as a great entry point that's tied to the release cycle, but the current workflow makes this underutilized. And I think the big part of the council discussion was that there was a feeling that Forgio-based process may give us an interesting way forward to use that release note process for the change proposal and have it be utilized more. Tomas actually took it as an action item for himself to build a demo of what that process could look like so that the Docs initiative could play test that, right? And see if that was a workflow that made sense. So again, Forgio is an opportunity here to experiment with new contributor processes, and that will help us scale better, right? Mindshare report here, they really focused on communicating how they're approaching the work in terms of 3 pillars, where events, recognition, and ambassadorship. I personally love the revamp of the badges as recognition, but also because they give an opportunity to build metrics in an interesting way. Council discussion really focused on the difficulty around event swag procurement process. There was some discussion about the correct timescales to put in requests ahead of events, and I think that sort of drove the action items here. Mindshare made a commitment to better document the swag procedure with an eye on expected timescales, so that requests can come in a timely manner to make sure that things like stickers for events are in the event boxes when they're needed. How am I doing on time? Okay, so the next initiative report was Atomic, rebranded from Image Mode. That was a decision they made as a group. The key takeaways from this is the contributors in this initiative are looking to use Konflux for image generation. The process is soft blocked moving forward to migrating to the Forgio, because Konflux doesn't have an integration with Forgio yet, but they can continue to use GitLab in this cycle. What's interesting, initiative has attracted net new Fedora contribution interest from people who are involved in the Bootsy upstream, which I actually find very exciting. Council discussion here is centered on concerns around the introduction of Konflux into the Fedora infrastructure, and some governance issues around making sure this initiative, because initiatives are meant to be spikes, and then they need to hand off to something. We want to make sure that what we hand off to is the correct governance structure here, so that it matches the scope of the work. There were no actual direct council actions here, primarily because we had a second discussion about Konflux on the third day already scheduled. It's clear from subsequent discussion that Flock is going to be a sync point for the stakeholders for this initiative, discuss project progress towards Fedora 45 goals and beyond. I think we're try to having like a 0-day meetup around Flock to really look past Fedora 44 and looking into what is deliverable for 45 in the scope of what the initiative has already documented as reach goals. So my takeaway there is like, it seems to be moving along. It's not super blocked yet, and that's a good thing. So the third day we got into strategic technology, and again, I will note the intent was to have David there as the FESCO liaison, and it's unfortunate he wasn't able to make it. I did sync with him on the Flatpak topic before he decided he was unable to make it. So some of what I presented on Flatpaks had buy-in from David in terms of how I wanted to present the points of conflict and the opportunities associated with Flatpak as a strategic technology. So I did do a summary presentation for council about where things are, including talking about the change proposal that I have in process right now, and the discussions I had at FOSDEM, in fact, with GNOME and at the GNOME ad board about trying to get a handle on the technology challenges that put the Fedora Flatpaks in direct conflict with the FlatHub remote. So a couple of council actions here. They agreed to pursue a possible hack fest with the wider ecosystem stakeholders for the technology to make it possible to deconflict as much as we can by making deeper technology changes that we can't do just in Fedora, but it has to be, if it's possible, it's going to involve deeper changes in the technology and maybe free desktop specifications. That is something that we have to see if we can have a discussion about with ecosystem partners. There's an agreement to go forward with proposing a structural change to Fedora Flatpaks modeled on EPEL that allows for a shared maintenance approach approach with the actual Fedora RPM packagers. I think there's a risk. Personally, I think there's a risk here in how Fedora Flatpaks the work is structured because it's not shared with the RPM maintainers in the same way that EPEL is now. I think some of the discussions I had, it made me realize that EPEL went through the same thing at one point where it was not structured correctly for the scale of the work. And I believe in the past, a particular contributor reached a burnout point by trying to make it work. And I want to avoid that by making sure that we take the lessons from EPEL and we can structure it in such a way that the RPM packagers that the Flatpaks are built on are able to help with their part of the workload, right? And I think it's going to be I think it actually going to be a great change that future proofs that output, regardless the controversy in the space of or the value proposition. This is just something structural. I think helps us avoid the lottery problem. So that was Flatpak. Strategic technology, Konflux. Aleksandra actually provided the presentation here. And this, I think, was a really good presentation that addresses some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around what this technology is. Again, this goes into Council's role to bridge the gap between the Red Hat and Fedora, right? And this is an uncomfortable space, but this is one of those technologies that we have to have those uncomfortable conversations about, right? The strategic scope here is because the Atomic Initiative is already interested in using this technology. It has a natural scope to talk about both in Council and in FESCO. This is not completely a Council discussion. This is technical, but it's important that Council understand what the technology is trying to be and how it can be integrated, so that we can communicate the right way about where the gaps are, and we can approach the upstream project and make sure that we are getting what we needed as the technology, so that we can integrate it in the best way possible. And subsequent conversations, I'm actually talking with the Laura as the initiative lead for Atomic. I think those conversations are happening now. I think we're actually getting there. I think it's less. I think there's less concern after I saw Aleksandra's presentation on how we can approach this as part of our infrastructure that is different than how Red Hat has decided to approach this internally for their product. So the Council action here is it basically comes down to having an opinion statement about suitability, right? This is really more making sure that we understand the strategic alignment here and where the technology can go. It's not a mandate. It is the fact that the Atomic Initiative has decided that they want to use this because it solves some problems for them, and based on the presentation from Aleksandra, it feels like it is a reasonable technology to move forward with for that purpose. And I think that's the end of what I needed to talk about in terms of recap. I will say there definitely needs to be follow-up conversations. I would encourage her to do the same presentation for FESCO, so it just helps everyone be on the same page. But it really helped me in terms of understanding how we could work with it. And I think Laura is already planning to take, or already has taken, that presentation up to upstream Konflux and unlock some conversations there about how we can value it versus how they were thinking about it initially, right? You know, like all good projects, all projects have to pivot at some point once they interact with actual users who want to use it. So I think we've reached that point with the technology, and it's going to be now that we have a group of people who are interested in using it. I think we're on a good place to try to integrate it as an option in the build system for them, because they have identified that they want to use it. So I'll stop there. Hopefully that was useful for people. I don't know if I said anything different than weren't in the daily summaries. One output that we had on top of that, I think it's new this year, is my understanding, is that we really attempted to have daily summaries at the end of every day to make sure not just so we remember what we did, but a way for the community to see what they did, so we could follow up on community questions asynchronously before we all brain dumped on the other side of the plane ride home. So I don't know how we want to do questions now, but I'll let Justin. Oh wait, we have one hand up. I'll let Aleksandra.
Yeah, I just maybe wanted to give some preview because I think your Konflux explanation was rather cryptic in the end. So just a small clarification. We will have a follow-up messaging better prepared, but just to be clear on one specific thing in that conversation is that we basically separated the conversation of using of Konflux in the Atomic initiative from using Konflux in the like RPM build Fedora core infrastructure. And these are two aspects which we will discuss in a separate ways. And for Atomic things, because it's the choice of the community to try and go on with Konflux, we say this is a good thing, and we kind of want them to experiment. But like we take some time for the Fedora setup and for the RPM-based processes, and we will have a follow-up on this specific aspect later, better prepared.
Yeah, that I should have been more explicit about that. Absolutely, it was really a discussion about using Konflux for image building, and we discussed concerns about using it for RPM, but it is not something that we are prepared to make a statement on, the saying that it is suitable. So we are going to, that was the action item, was to basically make that opinion statement about what it's suitable for in the Fedora context. Exactly. Thank you. Justin.
Sorry, I was just answering a quick question in chat. So I think for the Q&A, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and close your screen share? And I'm going to see if I can pin the members of Fedora Council, or I don't know if I can pin multiple people at once. But let me try this. If I do this.
Some
Okay.
Google magic. Yeah.
Oh, or I can only, I don't know. I'm experimenting a little bit to see if I can bring us all up here. I think I can. So, oh, I can only have 3 people at a time. All right, I'm not going to do the pinning. We actually have a lot of members of the Fedora Council who are on right now. I'm going to start with some of the questions from Q&A, and how we'll do it. We'll do some of the ones that are most upvoted in the Q&A tab for people who've been writing in questions during the meeting. And then we'll have some time for live Q&A. So if you do want to ask a question to the Fedora Council, and we have a number of us who are here and can take the questions, we'll just raise your hand on Google Meet, and we'll use that to build a queue. All right, so let's start with some of the top questions in the Q&A. So if I sort here, our most upvoted is one from this up in the chat, and there was a little bit of a response there, but we can bring this up to the whole council. A question from Joe Brockmere: is the bootc upstream meaningfully separate from Red Hat and Fedora, etc.? I thought bootc was largely a Red Hat driven initiative. Laura, do you want to take that one first, and then maybe Jeff, do you want to follow?
Sure. I would like to clarify first. So bootc itself is now a CNCF project. It was donated to the CNCF January of last year, I believe, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that one. I have to go look it up. But bootc itself has been moved over to the CNCF, and therefore we're really working hard on the upstream community into getting more contributors from outside. So right now we have a fairly healthy group of people that meet every Friday. Shameless plug that if you're curious about tool chains and want to come play in the sandbox, upstream would be more than happy to have you. Anyway, but that is really focused mostly on a lot of low-level things, as well as focused on some new tooling that's coming out, like ComposeFS, BCBK. What's the other one? Chunka is another new one that's out there right now. That's all part of the bootc project, and that is moving forward upstream. There's not a ton of crossover when it comes to the actual tech beyond some fixes that are being done in the Atomic side that are getting pushed upstream, like, hey, we noticed this, or issues are getting filed, or things like that. But it is considered a separate engineering work stream, and it is a lot of different work happening in 2 different places. So kind of depends on, I guess, how you look at it. But while it has been a Red Hat thing at first, we have a lot of interest from a lot of folks from outside. There's actually a group called Boot Crew that is using bootsy along with Upstream to start building out different operating system artifacts for other things other than Fedora. I don't want to get into them too heavily here just because this is the Fedora call, not the bootsy call. But a lot of work is being done. So if you're really curious about a lot of that, I'm more than happy to dig in elsewhere, knowing that this is Fedora Council. But when it comes to the Atomic side, right now where we're at is we're using bootsy to build the Atomic artifacts. And so a lot of the discussion is more about how to implement the tool chain in Konflux or in various different spaces versus how bootsy itself is built. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'll hand it off to Jeff.
I don't have much to add there other than the fact that it's bootsy is now on CNCF means that it is intended to become a multi-vendor project, right? It's in sandbox now, but the hope and the goal for all the CNCF projects that will gain enough multi-vendor support so that they can get through the life cycles gates of CNCF and get to graduated and be a sustainable project from the CNCF point of view. So, and I actually think bootsy is probably one of the most one of the biggest changes in the Linux distribution space that we're going to see. It's like one of those decadal like changes, and it could be taken up quite broadly. And I would like to make sure Fedora is out in front and is able to have an outsized ecosystem impact and really lead the charge there. It is interesting to see what Boot Crew. I don't look too closely. I have more than enough work in what I'm doing here, but what Boot Crew is doing is fascinating in terms of taking bootsy and spinning up other distributions. But I want to make sure that we were able to build a space that is that we can continue to lead the charge here. We've gotten a little stuck, and this initiative is meant to help get us unstuck. And if we can get to the desktop, the bootsy-based desktops, and I don't want to steal Laura's thunder about her scale presentation, but what she's going to demo at scale is exciting for me in terms of where this technology can go. But yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. It's Red Hat led, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be an ecosystem impact technology, and that's the hope. And we should be a first citizen in that ecosystem change.
Yeah. So we actually have quite a few more questions that are coming in through the Q&A, and we've got some really thoughtful ones in here too. The next top upvoted question is also from Joe Brockmere, and this one coming back to the governance conversation. And is, can you be more specific as to what the scope of the nonprofit would be, or what kind of activities it would fund?
That is the difficult question, because I think what we decided, like, we want to take this and do this in a way where we build on success here. We want to start with small risk because we're talking about money, right? And we're talking about trusting an organization with money and redistributing money. And I don't want to set that organization up for failure by asking it to do things that are too big initially. Because I'm anticipating that we're going to learn, and collectively we're going to make mistakes here. And we have to understand that, but also learn from them and do this iteratively. So we need to decide. That's one of the things we have to decide is, like, what is the first project that we're going to do this for that makes sense, that's well scoped, so that for my concerns, like, I want the first project to be to be such that it's time boxed and we have a fallback for the if people contribute money and we can't spend it, we know from the outset where that money is going to go, even after the time box for that project is done, right? I want to make sure that we learn from that, and then we can do bigger and bigger things. So to say scope, I think the scope is quite wide, but I don't want to start with a large project idea if we don't know what we need to know to do it well yet, right? I'm going to start small. I'm thinking, we could event related things that help us do more reach, but we can go much broader than that once we know that we can trust the process to do bigger things that require more communal resources. But the sky's the limit. We just have to work the process and get better at it and build trust into it. I just don't want to overwhelm a new process and imply more trust than we collectively are able to do based on experience doing this, if that makes sense.
Sure. Aleksandra, do you want to follow on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this. So I know that we have discussed the possible nonprofit backing for Fedora project for a long time, and for many people, like what we say right now is kind of disappointing, because when we hear like Fedora nonprofit, they think something like larger scope and different. But as Jeff said, we actually deciding from something very small, and the goal is not to have like one big fund and then have a committee to decide how to spend this money. The goal is to have actually tiny, small money collection events for the specific purpose for now. So this is like, we're not just putting money in a big bucket and then having 3 people on Fedora Council decide how to use that money. We rather say, we may be collecting money for Flock sponsorship and for, I don't know, Flock social event. Or we may be collecting money for this specific tiny project. And then you, as a community member, can decide whether you want to chime in with money on this or not. So this is like a very small, very targeted, and like as the least possible decision making on the Fedora Council side as possible kind of process where community can directly contribute to the specific purpose community members decide to contribute to. We need to start with that somehow. We have a task between a follow-up task between Mira Hornchuk and me to kind of come up with some framework where people can propose projects for this. And we were thinking about like something similar to Outreachy, where you can have a mentor submit a project and say, we're looking for funding for this specific project with this specific outcome, with this specific mentor. Let's chime in, collect the money, and do this as a funded project. But that's something where we need to come up with like much more documentation, and we will be working in the next year on ideas like this. If anyone wants to collaborate on defining this, let's work together. Yeah, help is welcome on this.
Yeah, I think Jeff and Aleksandra, you covered it perfectly. The only addition I would make is to the question of like what activities it would fund. From my perspective, as someone that does a lot of working with events, like my wish list thing, just for Justin personally, not speaking as the council, would probably be like a small event. Like, hey, Linux App Summit's going to be in a few months in Berlin, and I would love it if we could find a way to send someone to that. That might be too soon, but that's the kind of example I would love to see as a hypothetical case. Looking at the next question, we have one from...
hold on, Stefan has a hand up. I don't know if he got called on.
Stefan, did you want to do a quick live question? We can't hear or see you.
I think we have to skip.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will move on.
So the next upvoted question is from Mikhail Konechi in the chat, who is a part of our infra team. Do we plan to share resources infrastructure with FlatHub as use their work?
I don't currently know how to do that. I have a concern about risk 5, where if we got to risk 5 as a primary arch well ahead of flat hub, that is an interesting situation. But as of right now, based on the timelines I'm aware of in terms of us getting access to on risk 5 builders that would allow primary arch to happen, I'm less concerned than I was 3 months ago, just because the timeline has moved out. And I think in discussions with the GNOME ad board and at Quadec last year, where I basically said, y'all need to actually start building risk 5 soon. I think they've actually put effort on their part in making infrastructure happen. So I'm not seeing a situation where that is a way to build a bridge where it's needed. I think they have access right now to the infrastructure they need.
I will jump in a little bit. I think we haven't actually discussed the infrastructure aspect during the strategy discussion. One thing which we did discuss is that maybe Flatpak special interest group in Fedora need to also evolve into or reevaluate the purpose of vision and mission of that group. And maybe if we can build the collaborative aspect of that group better, it can be considered like that Fedora Flatpak special interest group may actually expand its coverage to maintaining certain Flatpaks on FlatHub, for example, or certain runtimes on the FlatHub, or contribute to testing of the runtimes available on the FlatHub against the Fedora distribution. So this is a different type of contribution, not with infrastructure resources, but more with the test qualification, verification resources, which we can set up so that the upstream FlatHub published Flatpaks stopped being the black box, which we are not caring at all about, but rather it becomes something which we can introduce in our test processes, in our qualification processes, in our scope of maintenance of certain applications in Fedora and so on. So it's all like very rough ideas, but anyone with ideas and willingness to do something in that space, please reach out. This is your time to come up with things like that.
Great. Thanks, Jeff and Aleksandra. I think we're going to have time for probably one last question. There's the next top voted question here. This one is coming from Michael Winters. Where did the conversation about defining and measuring contributions end? Any concrete conclusions or action items? The Fedora Data Working Group is working towards this goal, but it's a very complex and social.
I'll answer first. I think what I found the activities very useful, the facilitate activities. I felt like we didn't get all the way there to get to something actionable in terms of measurement. I think we first need to just figure out how we don't have a real definition, a usable definition of what's in scope as contribution, and we have to start there, and then that helps define a framework. I think overall, I think we got about 60% of the possible value out of the facilitated activities than we could have, and I think we're going to have to do another round of that aimed at measuring once we have the work done to define the scope of what we want to try to measure.
Yeah, I'll make a quick build on that because this is a topic that I'm really excited about. And one of my actions is to help try to bring this forward to the council with a proposal, but this idea of having like Fedora membership in the same way that like Debian has their concept of a Debian developer, and you have special privileges, and there's other examples of how communities identify membership. I know LibreOffice has the Document Foundation has like a member process for people who become a part of the Document Foundation. So there's lots of other examples that exist out there around what open source projects and communities are doing for this membership question. So to me, being able to come up with some kind of guidance or guidelines for how we recognize someone as a recognized Fedora contributor, to me, it actually ties into some old conversations we've been having for some time about even the Fedora ambassadors, which is kind of a different topic. But I think to me, that's what's exciting, that coming out of this, we could have this very clear concept of, regardless of what the person's activity is looking at data, is there a more objective way we say, yes, this person is a recognized, validated, vouched Fedora contributor versus someone who's not? And part of that system that we initially talked about, and again, this is something that you can expect to hear more about in the coming months leading up to Flock, but was using that idea of vouching, having a vouch-based system for someone becoming a Fedora contributor, being vouched for by an existing contributor. More to come on that, but again, I think it's something that's going to be really exciting for us to start looking at and thinking about how we do that. But it's definitely going to need to be a community conversation, because it's something that's going to be it would be a big change for how we look at things in Fedora from a data perspective too. Aleksandra, do you want to have a closing comment, and then we'll wrap?
Yeah, I want to still comment on this topic. I think for me, the main outcome of that conversation was that our goal is like to not list all possible contribution paths and then start measuring them. Our goal is to understand also that contribution ways evolve, and there are a lot of ways you can contribute which we cannot predict right now. It's like we may be not aware, and we always have to leave the door open for people to come to us and tell us how they actually contribute in the ways we haven't anticipated before. And this is an important part of that, like any kind of measurement or membership concept or whatever, is that list of contributions can be predefined strictly in the beginning, and then we just follow it. It is a living thing, it is a moving thing. And so for the data analysis group, I would recommend to not try to cover all possible contributions right now. It's rather pick some types of contributions you can find how to measure, how to categorize, work with that, but then expect that your list of possible contributions grow over time. And you have to be open about what comes as a contribution, what can be considered a contribution later, in which we should never make it a clear cut and say nothing except this list is a contribution. This would be a very hard thing to do, and also I think a wrong thing to do. So the door is open for whatever contribution you can imagine.
And we just have to figure out how to actually assess that, because part of what I have to do is I have to message contribution growth and user growth, right? That's how we show sustainability of the project, and we need to be able to keep looking at what contribution patterns exist that are observable, so we can, especially when we try to do things that with that impact contribution, we want to be able to know if the experiments we do help or hurt that, right? And I think there's a place for a framework, but it has to anticipate unknown new ways, and not be static. And I think to get down to what Winters is talking about, there's a lot there in the infrastructure in terms of the message bus messages, that in terms of that can be a framework if we have to put work into that to see patterns. In fact, we might see patterns that our contribution that we don't understand yet as a significant portion. So it's a complicated question, but I know for this role I have to start surfacing some metrics, especially when we start doing the work of pushing and trying to scale contribution. We have to be able to measure that out. We have to be able to measure that impact.
Yeah, Jeff, I think we're going to have to wrap up here. So thanks everyone for spending the time with us for this video meeting. There will be a video recording and transcript shared in time after the meeting. Keep an eye out on the Fedora YouTube and Fedora discussion for the recording and the summary. And for the rest, if you have questions or want to follow up on this topic, the link to the Fedora discussion topic was linked in the chat. You can also find it again on Fedora discussion for all of the daily summaries from the Council Strategy Summit and the follow-up conversations we're going to be having. So thanks so much, folks, for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you around in the Fedoraverse. Take care.